Hello, welcome to Northeast Wisconsin eClub live streaming meeting of June 1st, 2017. Today, we have as our guest speaker, Sara Vollbrecht, who will be talking to us about adventures in genealogy. Welcome to the program, Sara.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I just wanted to talk with you today a little bit about how to get started with genealogy. I started about 2 years ago, and there are some tips that I found helpful. There's a lot of information, so just a few things to get you started in the right direction.
Okay.
So I have a few goals today, but I just want to give you a little bit of background on myself first and how I got started. So my dad's cousin does a lot of genealogy, and she really researched that line of my family, but I felt like I needed to do my mom's side. No one was doing it. My grandmother was aging and getting older, and I knew, there was a small opportunity for me to really talk to her and get those stories down while I still could. And when I got started, it's very addicting, and I definitely got bit by the genealogy bug. It's like an intellectual treasure hunt. So it was really exciting, and I just kind of went with it. So a word of caution: when you get started, you will get addicted, that's for sure. So as I was researching my family, there's a few things I found that were really kind of cool among the many, but my first goal, I guess, was to just discover more about my grandparents and my great-grandparents, how they lived, really paint that picture of who they were, because I had not met my great-grandparents and I had heard really awesome stories about them. So I wanted to find more out about that. I found out that a few of my lines came to America shortly after the Mayflower and founded those towns along the East Coast, like the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and it was really interesting to see how deep my roots in America actually go. And I was able also to trace some lines back to ancestors that fought in the Revolution, as well as the royalty of Europe, William the Conqueror and Charlemagne, which was really cool because a lot of people are related to them and they're in their ancestral line, but it's hard to necessarily find that paper trail and be able to document that. So that was really exciting for me to be able to do. So some of my goals for listeners today is to learn where to look for information, learn how to organize and cite information, because that's going to be really important if you ever want to join some kind of lineage society, that you're able to verify and prove that, and learn about some tools to get started that I thought were really great for me when I was first starting out. So the first thing you want to do is gather information, and here are some possible sources that can get you started. Really, the goal in genealogy is to link one generation to the generation before that. And these are records that will really help you do that. Vital Records always has like a parent name, children names, spouse names, something like that, that really helps you make connections. Military records are really helpful for that too. If your ancestors fought in the Civil War or any kind of war like that, those records are helpful. Cemetery records are really helpful as well. You can take pictures of the headstones, and that counts as even like a documentation when you're going through and finding evidence. Family interviews and documents are really great too if you have some first sources like a family Bible that someone kept that lists children and birth dates and baptism dates, things like that. Birth certificates are really helpful. Probate records will really paint that picture of who was in the family and where they lived. And the public library is always a great source, especially for local history. Wherever you're at, they usually have people locally that will make books about what happened in the area. So those are some of the big records that you can start with to try and get those pieces of information and make those connections from one generation to the next. A lot of what I've done is online, which is great because it always hasn't been that way. In the very recent future, a lot more documentation and sources and things like that have been put online. So I started out doing most of my work online and then going and doing it by foot when I needed to do that. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the websites that I use that I really like. And I'll start with the free ones first, because genealogy can get expensive depending on what documents you're ordering and things like that. So we always want to try and use the free websites first. So the first one I'll talk about is Family Search. This one is my favorite because it has all kinds of information on it, like birth records, death records, World War II draft cards, things like that, immigration documents, and it collects them from the United States, and abroad. So some of my German heritage I've been able to get from this source. The one downside that I've found when I've been doing my research is that they don't always have a photo of the actual document. They'll usually have just the indexed information. And what that is people that upload these online get a picture of the source of the document, and they'll type in all of the important information from that document and then upload just the typed information. And I'll talk about why having that photo of the source is really helpful in a little bit. But about half the time I notice they have a picture and half the time they don't. They just have the indexed information. When you are on these sites, though, same with Ancestry, which I'll talk about in a minute, you want to be aware of user-created family trees. People can go on and they can upload their family tree, and some people do a really great job and they cite all their facts, and some people don't do that, though, and they'll just take information that they hear and they'll say, okay, well, this is the dad's name because I saw it on this tree, and you can't always verify that. So you want to make sure that you're looking for the sources when you're using trees online so that you can be sure that that is a true fact and it's not something that was just taken from somewhere else and it wasn't verified. The other free website that I really like is called Find a Grave. And it's basically like an online collection of cemetery photographs that people put up in there. It's like a memorial to that actual person. So you can look for your relatives on here. And it's really great because they'll have birth date, death dates from the cemetery that they took the picture from. But sometimes people know more than what's on the headstone, so they'll add extra information, like these were the family members and these are the things that the person did and when they immigrated. So you want to be careful that you know the sources for that. Because if it appears like this might be extra than what's given on a headstone, you could email the person that made that page and just say, hey, this information looks really great, but I was wondering what sources you use to find that information. Because it can be really great and verify some things that you already know, but you want to make sure, again, that you know that that's accurate information being reported. So some paid websites that I really liked, newspapers.com is really great if you're trying to, paint that picture of the person and find out who they were and maybe some interesting stories about them, because you can clip articles from the newspaper. You do have to pay, but if you have a library card, you can get it free via BadgerLink. So you just go to BadgerLink and there's usually like a tab for genealogy, and then on there's different sources you can get with your library card. So you can get some newspaper articles that way. And I definitely think it's one of the more exciting things, one of the more exciting resources, I guess, to use, because they always tell you little family stories that you may or may not know about. Ancestry.com is a really famous one that lots of people know about. It's very similar to Family Search, except you have to pay for it. And it also, I feel, in my opinion, at least from what I've noticed, is there are more photos of the actual documents with the indexed information on there. But you have to just kind of weigh what do you need and how much is it costing. Sometimes what I'll do is I will save up all my research that I have to do that I can't get anywhere else, and then I'll join for a month and do all my research at that point. So that's a different source you can use, but again, be careful of the family trees that people create. I found, especially on Ancestry, there's a lot more linking to trees without verifying that it's correct. So just be very careful of that. And what I like to call shaky leaf syndrome is you get a little leaf and it says, hey, you have 3 new hints for some records that have the same name as the person you're looking for. So you can click on those and they're great, but they may not always match the actual person that you're looking for. It just might be someone with the same name. So it's really exciting and you want to just look at all of them and save them to your trees, but just be careful that you really are verifying that that's the same person you're looking for. And I believe last time I checked, you could get it for free at the public library because they have a subscription, so you can go in and do research there too if you'd like to do it that way. Fold 3 is put on by Ancestry, and it has all of historical military records, and it has a lot of the times pictures of those records too, so that's a great place to look if you're looking for military things. And Find My Past is very much like Family Search and Ancestry. It's just a different one, and it has, again, all types of information, and some of these have photos and some don't. I can look at some of the records for free, but most of them I have to join and pay to see. So that's just a third option to get like your all types of information database. So when you are gathering this information, something you want to do, like let's say you're looking up Grandpa Jim and you're researching and gathering information, you want to look up his siblings as well, and even his children, all of them, because it can help you verify things that you can't always find when you're just looking for your direct ancestors. So that's actually happened to me a few times too, where I've gotten stuck and I didn't know what to do. So I would dig a little deeper into some of the siblings, and I'd be able to find different pieces of information that weren't necessarily on a document from my direct ancestor. So it's good to keep track of who the people in the family are, and if you get stuck, to really kind of dig into them a little bit. Because really, again, our ultimate goal is to connect to the prior generation, so sometimes we have to kind of go around in a circle to get there. Another important thing to note too, when you're referring to anybody that's a female or recording them by name, you always use their maiden name. So when you search records, you're going to want to search for their maiden name as well as their married name, but when you document that, they're always referred to by their maiden name. So I said a little bit earlier that I would talk about why it's important to see a picture of a document. So index records are really helpful, but they don't always have everything on them that's on the actual document. So I clipped a picture of a census record, and you can see way on the far right, they have an occupation column that may or may not be indexed. But it's really cool to kind of paint that picture of that person again and see what they did and where they worked. And a little bit to the left of that, there's a column for where their parents were born and what language they spoke, so that can help you too when you're trying to find who is the immigrant in the family. Oh, if it says they're from Germany, their parents were, then you know that when you're looking for their parents, you should be looking for an immigration document. So that's really helpful. And the same is true for World War II draft cards. On the backs of those, there's a whole section for physical features. So it'll really tell you what someone looked like. And there'll even be a place for employment again, so you can kind of get a better picture of who that person was. And these are just 2 examples, but that's true for any kind of document. There's usually more information than what's indexed. So if it's a birth record, you might have witnesses on there that are indexed, but they may be family members that you've been looking for. So just to always try to get your eyes on the actual document if possible. When you're gathering information too, this is something I just discovered very recently, but you want to look for the sources at the bottoms of family trees. I don't really look at the trees so much. I go to their sources and I look at what documents have people cited. Are they ones that I already found? Are there new ones that could help me? And recently I got stuck on one of my ancestors from early America, and I didn't know what to do, so I thought, I'm just going to Google his name and see what happens. So I Googled it, expecting just nothing of any value, and it turns out he's kind of famous and has a Wikipedia page. So I thought, all right, well, Wikipedia is user created. I'm not really going to look at the actual information on the page, but I'm going to go right to the bottom into like the works cited. And turns out he liked astronomy and wrote all these almanacs with poetry in it, and they're all cataloged at the University of Nebraska, and I got that through Wikipedia. So I was like, that's awesome. So if you get really stuck and you think maybe they might be famous or whatnot, you could just Google them and see what happens, and you might get lucky. So we've talked about where to look and different kinds of sources. When you're getting these sources, you want to be thinking about who created that source and is it a good one. So like I said before, I'm not going to necessarily look at like the actual Wikipedia information. I'm going to go to the sources and I'm going to think, all right, University of Nebraska, that's a good source. That's pretty legitimate and I can really trust what they put out. And the other thing too, is it a primary source, which means it was created by someone that actually knew the person or experienced that event or was there. Or is it a secondary source where it's transcribed by somebody? Because that could have errors if someone transposed numbers or things like that. So it's okay if it's a secondary source, but you always want to be thinking about that too when you are evaluating them and really thinking about the information that is on that source. And so for every fact that you put down, you want to have 2 or 3 sources. And then you can really say, yes, this is a fact. I can believe this because I've seen it in at least 2, maybe 3 places. And sometimes that gets a little tricky because, for example, let's say you're on Find a Grave and they talk about a marriage date. Okay, well, that's one source. And then you're reading a published genealogy and they give the same date. Okay, that's 2 sources. I'm done. But if you dig deeper, you'll notice that maybe they both reference the same one marriage record. So really, you only have one source that's listed in 2 places. So you want to make sure you're getting as many sources as you can, just to make sure what you've got is true and correct. So when you're citing your sources, I'm not a huge fan of citations. It's a lot like, where do I put the period? Where is like parentheses? How does that work? So evidence explained is a great place to go, and you can type in the kind of evidence that you want to cite in the search bar, and it'll tell you how to do that. And if you're still really not sure how to do that, and you've looked, I would say cite enough information that another person can find that piece of evidence that you're looking at without too much work. And the thing is, like with websites, URLs change, things move on the internet. So if I can save like a snapshot of that document or save it as a PDF, then I'll always have it even if the URL changes. And then Roots Magic is the software that I use that I'll talk about in a minute, but that has built-in fillable citation forms, which I love because you just say, I'm going to make a marriage record, and up pops a box with all these forms that you can just type in, and it does all the work for you. So that's really nice too. So before you get started collecting all these things that we talked about and citing evidence, you really want to get organized because it will get out of hand very quickly. What I did first, and I suggest, is joining a genealogy website or a blog. These are 2 that I've joined, and I actually did the genealogy do-over live with Thomas, and that was great because they'll walk you through different pieces of genealogy to talk about and think about way more in depth than I can get into. And I know they've started already this year, but you can see their archived blog posts, and you can follow them at your own pace, but they'll talk about different ways to organize research, citing different kinds of records. They really get into it, and it really helped me have a better understanding of how to do it correctly. So I definitely suggest doing that if you're serious and have the time to do that. And you want to make sure you set goals when you start, because you will get off track. It's very easy to get off track, especially when you find something really cool and you want to just follow that lead. So when you set your goals, you want to be very specific. So I want to research my mom's line is not very specific. You want to say something like, find the parents' names of Grandpa Jim, and then maybe find when Grandpa Jim was born, things like that, and just keep a list of that because, like I said, it's really easy to get off task if you're not, focused and you know what you're working for. So Roots Magic, like I mentioned earlier, is a software, and I really suggest getting one because it's very hard to keep track of things on paper. When you get to so many generations out, everything's doubling, so it just gets out of control. I was suggested, or it was suggested that I use Roots Magic, and I love it. It's really inexpensive, and you get like a to-go version too that you can put on a thumb drive and take with you if you want to do research at the library or however you want to do that. It has light bulb hints, which are like the leaf hints on Ancestry, but they take you to family search records so you can see them for free. And they also recently linked Find My Past records too. So you can go to there if you have a paid subscription and you want to see some of those. So it's nice that when you have this tree and you have it set up in your software, you'll get a little light bulb that'll light up if there's like a new document for you to look at that might be that person. So that's really cool. And the reason that I actually purchased this software out of everything is because you can create reports. So you can create like a relationship chart, a family tree, a wall chart with everybody on it. And you can even create like a narrative report where it writes all your information like a story, which is really cool. So you have all this information, and with the click of a button, boom, it's done. It's in a nice report for you. So that was really helpful, and I've used that quite a lot. So besides the software program, which you really should get, you want to save your information digitally too, because again, paper copies, it can get really out of control, and if you have a fire or water damage, it's all gone. So I've really just gone digital, and it's been wonderful. And I'll save it in more than one place too. So I usually have something on the cloud. I use Google Drive, but you can use anything like that. I have an external hard drive that I back everything up on. All of my documents, my software, everything that I've done is backed up there. And then I also have a copy saved on my computer. So that way, if my computer goes, I've got 2 other copies somewhere else. Or if there's a fire or something, I've got things in the cloud. And then I also purchased a scanner to scan in my hard copies, because I have copies from my immigrant ancestors that they hand wrote that are very brown, and they're not going to last much longer. So I wanted to get that scanned. I've done all my family photos, so that's all saved in different places, and we have that because that won't last very long. So if you do go digital and you do choose to do that, which I really highly recommend, you want to make sure that you name your files in a way where you can find them, because I made the mistake of not doing that right away, and I had to go back and open all of my things again because I named everything birth certificate. Well, when you get like 200 people, you have to go through 200 documents called birth certificate, and you don't know whose is whose. So this is just an example of how I do it. You can choose whatever way works for you, but I do last name, first name, date of birth, because people have the same name and they might be born in different years, and then the name of the document. And that's really helped me find things and keep them. And then I put them each, I have a folder for my mom's side and a folder for my dad's side. And in those folders, each person has a folder. So that's just what works for me. You can do it however works for you, but just really stay organized, because you will have a lot of information that comes very quickly. So here's the time where I give a little plug for indexing. So because everything is online, and we're really fortunate to just have Ancestry and Family Search where we can go on and look up documents, it's there because people have given their own time to index records. So I index for Family Search, and I think it's awesome if people can give back, because in genealogy we kind of say you take some and you give some. So what's nice about that is you can really learn a lot about the different kinds of documents while you're indexing them too. I did a whole bunch of World War II draft registration cards where I would look at them and index information and send it in to be verified by Family Search. And I know that document like the back of my hand now. So if I'm thinking about, okay, I need to find like a place of employment, that's one place I can look because I know what's on there. If you do census records, anything like that, you can really learn a lot about those documents, and that will help you in your own research. They also are really looking for people who have foreign language experience, because a lot of the records being indexed right now are English, because people in the US are doing a lot of that. So I've done Spanish records before, and that's really helpful. And I like to think, you know, if I'm doing that, maybe that frees up someone else to put a record that I'm looking for I will need. Because there have been times where I found something and it was just uploaded 2 months before that. So really, it's about giving back and helping out. So you can always check it out and see if it's right for you, but that would be something to consider doing as well. And the last thing I'll kind of leave you with, there's an article called 27 Golden Rules of Genealogy. I just picked a few that I thought were really, really, really important. So I'll just talk a little about each of them. So don't assume everything you find online is correct. Things that you might find on headstones. I found discrepancies between headstones and death records because sometimes, when someone passes away, people forget exactly what year they were born in, or someone hears them wrong. So it's okay if there's like a little bit of a discrepancy and you can make sense of why that might have happened between records. So you may run across that, and that's okay. If you create a tree online, do not show living people's information. You want to keep that private. That's a really big privacy concern. So usually when you put on trees online, it'll ask you if the person's living, and if they are, it will hide it, or you can check a box that says hide living people, or just don't put them online at all. But we just want to make sure that anyone that is currently alive, their information is not out on the internet. Again, if you take information from someone, give them credit for it and help them in return. That's always just really good practice. You want to start with yourself and work backwards. You want to make those generation to generation links, starting with yourself, even though you're like, well, I know that's my dad and I know that's my mom, but you really want to do that to verify everything. Name and date variants are also common. So for example, census records would come to the door of someone's house and they'd answer and they'd say, what's your name? And if they had a name that was particularly difficult to pronounce, the census takers always wrote things phonetically. So spellings may not be what you're used to. Instead of like maybe a Mary, it says Mercy because someone heard you wrong. So you have to kind of keep that in mind, especially with census records. Two, if someone wasn't home, they'd say, well, how old are they? And they'd say, well, they're about 50. So they kind of put down about 50 years when that birthday was. So the birth dates on the census records may or may not match as well, but they may be close. So just keep that in mind too with those census records. And then the last thing is just use ethics when you're discovering shocking information. I found my fair share of shocking things, and everybody does. So you just want to make sure that if it's about somebody in your family, that you check with people that you may need to check with before you put that out there, because that can really kind of rock somebody's world, and you want to be very careful when you discover things that might be shocking for people. So those are kind of the big things that I saw in this article, but there's more to look at, just kind of things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing genealogy. So that's all I have. So I have time for questions.
I'll take myself off of mute there, Sarah, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
My sister been doing some genealogy searching for our maternal grandparents.
Okay.
And difficulty has, and she's overcome a lot of them, was that our grandfather was illegitimate.
Okay.
So only family stories of who the mother was, no idea who the father was. At least no one owned up to it anyways. Any hints of how to work around that kind of like a dead end when it becomes the records were intentionally hidden?
Yeah, that's tricky. I think, right off the bat, like immediately my thought, and I haven't done a lot of work with it yet, but even like DNA maybe, a lot of stuff is going on now with getting your DNA and sending it in. And if you choose to do that, I would suggest using family tree DNA. There tends to be more of the genealogy piece as opposed to the ancestry. I've heard that, and I can't, this is just what I've heard, but people that do ancestry, at least some of them, are doing it just to see where they're from and not necessarily to make those connections with other people. So I would suggest family tree DNA. I've just started doing that, and I'm just starting to dabble in it, but that might help you connect at least, if you do the autosomal where it searches male and female lines, it might help you make some of those connections, and you may find something that way.
Okay.
That would kind of be my first guess off the top, because, if people are hiding records and you don't really have those, and you don't have someone that knows, and can say for sure that's who it was, I would kind of do that. If someone knows and you have an idea who it is, you could just go with that. And then, with that caveat saying, okay, well, we can't really prove that because we don't have any records.
Mm-hmm.
But the DNA may help you verify some of that if you continue to research and have like a paper trail, and then you can kind of verify with the DNA. That may help. So that's kind of my first idea. And granted, I haven't been doing this very long, but that would be kind of maybe where I would go.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
I know you listed some of the free sites and then some of the pay as well. How much, again, I can't remember how long you've been doing this, and how much money do you think in total you've invested so far in this process?
I've been doing it for about 2 years now, and I've really been pretty lucky because I'm doing this in a very digital age where I can get things like through Family Search that are free. So I haven't really had to invest a whole lot. I did purchase a probate record like last year because it didn't have any of that indexed online. You had to order it through a library, and those can get a little bit expensive. I think I paid $30 because I just said, like, don't copy after this many pages because some of those can get really long. So I'd say, probably like with software, because I bought my software and I've done some of those paid websites. I'd say probably around maybe $100, $150, which is not a lot compared to like one of my family members did it before all this was on the internet, and she'd have to go and buy the books and do all those things and make the copies. So, we're pretty fortunate now where we can do most of the easier things for free. And then just when it starts to get tricky, you may have to spend more money. And then if you do like the DNA piece of it, that's also more expensive. So you want to look when that's on sale. And I just did that too, so I probably should up it to like $200 now because that's not cheap to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're pretty lucky that we're doing it now and we have all the resources that we have.
I'm going to check out that Family Search.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I just really like that it's really genealogy focused, and people are really doing a nice job for the most part of citing sources when they're doing trees, but you just want to be careful too that you look for those no matter where you are.
Okay, Sarah, I want to give myself the last question, and then we'll be running out of time.
Okay.
Is on my wife's side of the family, both her mom and dad were in the military, but we didn't really get we don't know what units they served in and what their we know a branch, but we don't know what in more details. What's the best place to go and get that kind of information?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I would first start with Family Search because it's free, and I type in their name and see what comes up. You don't want to get too specific when you put in information because that narrows it down, especially if like on a census record, this is not a military record, but for example, a census record, their name was spelled phonetically and it's not close to what you put. So you want to make sure that you're not putting too much in when you're searching, that you're really narrowing that.
Okay.
You just want to get enough where you're not getting like 2,000 things to look through. So I would try Family Search first. Usually they might link to an Ancestry link as well, where you might be able to see the index information, but then they would have a picture that you may or may not be able to see.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't find anything on Family Search, I would save it for like whenever you join like Ancestry and do a bunch at once. The other thing that if you really, military records is going to be fold 3, you have to pay for that, and it's put on by Ancestry, but I know I found a Civil War record that I need to go look at on there, so I'm just kind of saving up some things to look for before I join again. But that would have only military records, and that would be a good place to look if you're okay with joining for a little bit.
Okay. Sarah, we're going to have to close it off there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be, in a little while, we'll be posting this on our website, and we'll send you a link.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.